The Tennessee Volunteers travel north to face off against the Ohio State Buckeyes, who are 7.5-point favorites. This is the second night game of the first round, the other being Indiana at Notre Dame, which takes place on Friday, December 20th at 8 p.m. This game takes place Saturday, December 21st at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And the first thing that I got to think of in this game is, who does the cold weather benefit? Many people have talked about this on other channels. Many have. Does the cold weather benefit Ohio State because Tennessee isn't used to it? Or does it benefit Tennessee because their style of play is, right now on offense, more physical? And on defense, they're physical too. Ohio State is more impressive on defense, as we will discuss. But Tennessee is pretty close on the defensive side of the football to Ohio State. In fact, there may even be an argument that they're better on that side of the football. So that's one thing. But more importantly, because weather does play a role, but it's ultimately not the biggest role, is which offense steps up. Which offense oils up their machine, which, if the machine is well oiled, if it's taken care of, if it's filled to the brim with diesel or gasoline, whatever you want to use, they both can be some of the best offenses in the country. But all season long, especially as the year's gone on, especially in conference play, there have been notable issues and inconsistencies with both of these offenses. So whether it's Joey Hazel or Chip Kelly, I'm curious to see how these offensive coordinators do in this matchup, calling plays. And also for the players on offense, how do they perform? Because there have been some communication issues, whether it's Ohio State's offensive line or Tennessee's quarterback and wide receivers and the chemistry they have. This is an intriguing game, a very intriguing game, and it's projected by the spread, Ohio State being favored by 7.5 right now, to be one of the more entertaining college football playoff matchups in the first round. I want to talk about the strengths, the key strengths, some of them the non-negotiables for both of these teams, things that you have to face off against, where you can't just go around them, you have to go through them, and you got to figure out how you can go through them. For Tennessee, that's their running back room, and that's their defensive end group, and overall, it is a rush defense that's elite, if we got to be honest with ourselves here. You look at Tennessee's rushing defense, and on the season, their defense is only averaging 14.9 opponent points per game, which is fourth, 0.221 opponent points per play, which is fifth. They're only allowing 4.2 opponent yards per play, which is fourth, and 2.9 yards per carry, which is sixth. They're only allowing 6.9 opponent first down rushing attempts per game, which is 22nd, or first down rushes per game, like first downs that an opponent earns by running the football, and 101.9 rushing yards per game. And this is despite the fact that teams like to run on Tennessee. They love to. Teams run on Tennessee for an average of 35.2 attempts per game, which is 61st, and yet Tennessee is top 10 in the majority of rushing defense categories. It's an impressive unit, this Tennessee defense is. Tim Banks has done, I think, a phenomenal job this year with Tennessee, and it's helped them win a lot of games in spite of some of their clunkiness on the offensive side of the ball. A player that you got to look out for Tennessee is James Pierce Jr., their defensive end, who is projected in the preseason. I don't know about now because I don't often pay attention to NFL mock drafts, but James Pierce Jr. at one point was projected to be a high first-round player. He's very impressive, he is, with the Tennessee Volunteers. And Tennessee on the season has been a team that is defensively led. And against Georgia, there were some weaknesses shown, but their second loss to Arkansas was because of the offense. They were able to shut down Vanderbilt's offense, which is a very hard thing to do. There's a lot to be impressed by with this team, who sits at 10-2, top 10. They were the first team left out of the home college football playoff zone in the first round. If Tennessee and Ohio State switched rankings, it would be Tennessee hosting Ohio State. The Volunteers on the season have a pretty impressive pass rush where they have 29 sacks and James Pierce Jr. is accounting for 7.5 of them. It's not the same quality of pass rush as, let's say, Ohio State when they're blitzing, or Oregon or Penn State when they send 4 and they scheme it well so they get home. Or I would even say the same thing about Texas. Pittsburgh's at a pretty good pass rush, but Tennessee's is good. It's great. And James Pierce Jr. by himself is a non-negotiable. And then you look at Dylan Sampson, where Tennessee this season is running the ball quite well. In fact, very well. On average, 5 yards per carry, 29th. They are 5th in rushing attempts per game, averaging 45.4, and they're averaging 226.2 rushing yards per game. They run the ball a lot. They don't have the same efficiency that Notre Dame or Penn State or even USC do on the ground, for context, but they run the ball a lot and they wear you down on the ground. They don't give up running the football. You look at Ohio State, their non-negotiable is their entire wide receiver room and their safeties. And their defense is elite. It's not just the rushing defense or the passing defense. It's both. Everything the defense does, except getting pressure by sending 4, is elite. If they blitz, the blitzes are often timed up well, and the coverage guys are good enough to where you're going to have to run a brilliant scheme, or your receiver is going to have to be an X-factor player to negate that. That's most of the time. Sometimes we have seen where that doesn't work, but this Ohio State defense has been good in every game with the exception of the Oregon game. And after what Oregon did to Penn State, I wonder if Oregon's offense at its ceiling is just so good that no defense can shut it down. But Ohio State is first in opponent points per game, first in yards per point, first in opponent points per play, and they've played one of the nation's tougher schedules, so you know this defense is legit. They only allow 1.3 opponent red zone scores per game. First, they are first in opponent red zone scoring percentage, only allowing opponents to score in 55.17% of their red zone trips. And they are first in offensive touchdowns per game. They allow 10.9 opponent points per game and 0.178 opponent points per play. This is a dominant defense. It only allows 3.9 opponent yards per play and 241.5 yards per game. Opponents only average 2.9 yards per carry on OSU on the ground, 5th, and 97.3 rushing yards per game, which is 6th. Teams only average 9.7 yards per completion on the Buckeyes, 3rd, and 5.8 opponent yards per pass attempt on them, 7th. They have an elite defense, Ohio State does, and they have receivers like Jeremiah Smith, for example, who is an All-American. Emeka Egbuka, I think, is also close to being an All-American. Carnell Tate is a future star. And their safeties, when you look at it, Caleb Downs, Lathan Ransom, the nickelback position is occupied by Jordan Hancock, who is a player that I very much like. They're impressive. They tackle well, they hit hard, they do a good job of reading the defense and also defending the pass. Jeremiah Smith on the season has 934 receiving yards, 10 receiving touchdowns, and 57 receptions. He's a big part of the reason why Will Howard has been an upgrade overall compared to quarterback Kyle McCord, who's at Syracuse now after transferring away from Ohio State after the conclusion of the 2023 regular season. Some weaknesses for these teams. For Tennessee, it's the quarterback position. It's Nico Imaliava, having a good year, but not a great year, not playing up to the expectations that many, including myself, had from him in the preseason. It's a Tennessee offensive line that is anywhere from above average to good in both pass protection and also run blocking, but not great in either of those. And overall, it's a pass offense that has just been off kilter. You see moments where, like Dante Thornton's averaging over 20 yards per reception, where they can be explosive and they can really punish defenses deep or in the passing game in general. But there are also moments where it's just totally dysfunctional. There are drops. Imaliava overthrows someone, doesn't make the right decision. Tennessee is just their weaknesses are more about inconsistency than about talent, which is both encouraging as they have a long time to prepare and Heupel is a good coach. For a game like this, it can be encouraging. It can also be discouraging because this is the best defense that Tennessee has played all season long. Also the best secondary. Georgia's secondary has had some holes. They have been vulnerable. We've seen it against Texas. We've seen it against Alabama. We have seen it against Georgia Tech. And we also saw it against Tennessee at times. Ohio State's secondary is, I wouldn't say exactly the same. It's not that much better than Georgia's by a wide margin, but it is better. And add on top of that Ohio State has the better rushing defense. Well, Tennessee has their work cut out for them, and they're playing on the road in a much different climate, in a colder climate, in a hostile environment with over 100,000 people who are going to be, very angry fans. Ohio State has a sack percentage of 10.51%, which is second. So they get to the opposing quarterbacks in over 10% of their dropbacks. Tennessee, they allow 2.2 sacks per game, which is 74th, and they have a QB sack percentage of 7.45%, which is 91st. So that is not an encouraging matchup there. They only average 7.9 yards per pass attempt and 12.5 yards per completion. And again, they run the ball a lot, but they're not even top 25 in yards per carry. And it's a lot like Ohio State, where earlier in the year, Ohio State and Tennessee feasted on the ground, but now, after injuries for OSU and for Tennessee, after they've played some tougher competition, it's a little bit of the same for Ohio State as well. They've really began to be exposed in the fact that their rushing offense, it can be good. It does have some spark, but it's also not a perfect unit by any stretch of the imagination. Nico Imaliava is going to have a great game here. Same with Brew McCoy, Chris Brazzell II, Squirrel White, Dante Thornton. They're going to have a great game. And this offensive line with players like Lance Hurd, Andrej Karic, Cooper Mays, who's a finalist for the Remington Trophy, I believe, for the best center in the country, along with Seth McLaughlin, despite his injury, and good for him. He's been an elite center this year before his tragic injury. They're going to have to step up, this Tennessee offensive line, their wide receiver core, and their quarterback room. You look at Ohio State, their weakness is their offensive line as well. It's slowly but surely been falling apart because their starting five was near elite, if not elite, but their depth was horrific, and we identified that in the preseason, and all it was going to take was an injury to really make the whole thing disheveled, and indeed it did. And then the second injury was, I think, the final straw that broke the camel's back, especially in regards to pass protection. The run blocking before McLaughlin got hurt was questionable, but it was manageable. But after he got hurt, the pass rush on the interior was that much worse for Will Howard, and the rushing offense was a little bit worse, too, than it already was. And that really slowly has made Ohio State's offense more and more one-dimensional. Ryan Day talked about how they were experimenting and theorizing about different offensive line combinations. I think that's a good idea. I think that the extra time off can maybe help the offensive line, because at one point in the year, they were first in QB sack percentage. They're 18th, and they've been falling further and further down the list in basically every game. And they're outside the top 50 in rushing offense, only averaging 169.3 yards per game. They're 94th in rushing attempts. They don't run the football as much as they used to, obviously because of the injuries. And at one point, they were, I think, maybe even number one in yards per carry. They're down to 26th, only averaging 5 yards per carry. Their rushing offense as a whole is a weakness, and it does not help their passing offense either, as they built this team to run the ball to sort of make the passing offense more explosive, not pass the football a lot and run the football occasionally to keep the defense honest. The critical matchup in this game, and we'll talk about another one in a few seconds, is Tennessee's Tim Banks and his defensive line linebackers and safeties against Ohio State's Chip Kelly and the offensive line and the running backs. I say this because whether it's the cold weather or, more importantly, the fact that I think Ohio State has built this scheme to run the football at times, how does a struggling rushing offense do against a rushing defense that is a near elite unit, perhaps an elite unit? Can Tennessee do what Michigan did, what Nebraska did, what Penn State was able to do at times, and what Oregon, I think, was able to do in the second half, but Ohio State adapted in spite of that and still scored on Oregon? Can they make Ohio State one-dimensional? Because if Chip Kelly, changes up the scheme a little bit, tries different blocking concepts, I think Ohio State had a lot better success with like pull blocking and more complex run concepts, and also speed options and misdirections compared to just straight up pounding up the middle. And they do a successful job passing, and their defense operates like it has all season long, the game can get out of hand for Tennessee. But if Tennessee can do what many other teams have done and make Ohio State's offense one-dimensional, it'll be harder on Jeremiah Smith, harder on Will Howard, and that will give their offense time to maybe figure out this Ohio State defense a bit. And it's going to be hard to figure out this Ohio State defense because Jim Knowles is one of the best schemers in all of college football. He's one of the best defensive coordinators, and he has a lot of talent there. But Ohio State is going to want to run the football, whether it's speed options, whether it's misdirections, whether they decide to run up the middle. And it's all about the offensive line for Ohio State and the running backs, and whether or not their current O-line, Carson Hinsman, Tegra Shabola, Josh Fryer, Austin Sierraveld, and Donovan Jackson, or if the rotation's different, how do they and Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins do against, James Pierce Jr., Bryson Eason, Amari Thomas, Omar Norman Lott, Dominic Bailey, and then Will Brooks, Andre Turrentine, Jeremiah Tillander, and Arian Carter. That's a fascinating matchup. And then you look here at, I think, what is Tennessee's passing defense specifically against Ohio State's passing offense. I didn't include any matchup that featured Tennessee's offense against Ohio State's defense because I am going to tell you here and now, I think that if this is going to be a high-scoring affair, that translates to an Ohio State win, perhaps a dominant Ohio State win. This Tennessee team against, frankly, like some of the best teams they played all year, like Florida, when Florida had DJ Lagway, and before Graham Mertz was like totally out for the year, they struggled against them offensively. They struggled against Georgia offensively. They struggled against Alabama offensively. Alabama shut them out in the first half. Against this defense, Tennessee is not going to be scoring 40 points. They're probably not even going to be scoring 30 points. How Tennessee wins this game is 24-17. It's 20-13. It is a low-scoring affair. And they will need to get pressure on Will Howard and make him uncomfortable. They will need to cover these receivers well. Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, Brandon Innes, they're going to get open at some point, but maybe you limit them. You play bend but don't break. You force them to get into the red zone where Ohio State used to be elite, and now they're kind of mediocre because of their one-dimensionality, and you make them work. You make them work in the red zone. You limit explosive plays. And in pass blocking, you do what you can do. You line up James Pierce Jr. wherever he is the most advantageous, wherever he has the most leverage, and you send him at Will Howard. If Tennessee can stop Ohio State's rushing offense and make them one-dimensional, that is not enough to guarantee a win, because what Ohio State can do is what they did against Oregon, where, okay, we can't run the football on you, we'll just pass, and it will still be a game. And Tennessee does not have the offense Oregon does, or the home field advantage to give them the energy to just, respond with offensive body blow after offensive body blow. Tennessee can't win in a shootout here. Ohio State can. Both of these teams can win in a low-scoring, gritty affair, but I think mentally and also stylistically, a low-scoring, gritty affair can absolutely benefit Tennessee more than Ohio State. So those are the key matchups. I'm very excited for this game. It's going to be a night game, Ohio State's first night game of the year against an actual decent opponent, not Western Michigan, so I know that place will be buzzing. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also hit that notification bell so that way you can get notified when new content from College Football with Sam drops. I appreciate you very much, and also share the video around to others who enjoy the sport of college football and love it as I do and as you do, and comment your thoughts down below so that we can have a conversation, because I want to know what you are thinking. And join our Discord server where we talk college football 24/7 via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. Thank you to my Heisman Patreon members, Crash2488, Brasco Rascal, and Conlo OH. Thank you to my All-American Patreon members, Chris Lane, Ismar, and Tyler Nye. And thank you to my All-Conference members, John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, Joshua Jorgensen, and Will Loftus. Make sure to check out my merchandise store and or Patreon page, or super chat down in the comment section below to support the channel. The Patreon page and merchandise store links are in the description or down below in the pinned comment. I hope you have a wonderful day. It is December, so Merry Christmas and also Happy New Year. I will see you guys soon.